Hi, I'm Élisabeth Pacherie, or Élisabeth Pacherie if you wish. I would like to thank Richard Brown, the organizer of this conference, and Mirto Milopoulos, who put together this year's special session on action consciousness, for inviting me to present a paper. I wrote this paper especially for this conference, and as I guess happens to many of us, I miscalculated the time it would take, so that in the end had to rush to meet the deadline. So the second thing I would like to do is apologize to you for not having had time to record an oral presentation of the paper or even to make a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm afraid that you will have to read the paper in a good old-fashioned way if you're interested in the topic. This paper is dedicated to the memory of Marc Janro, who very sadly passed away in June last year. My main reason for recording this video is that I would like to say a few words about Marc. I'm one of the few members of a rare species, the French female analytic philosopher of mind with naturalistic proclivities and a strong interest in action. My having had the good fortune to meet Marc Janro and interact with him over the years is largely responsible for my sustained interest in action and action consciousness. I first met Marc Janro in 1994 when, with Joël Proust, who had been my PhD supervisor and remained my mentor, we started a collaboration with him and his team in Lyons. Our objective was to investigate disturbances in the sense of agency in patients with schizophrenia. One important outcome of this collaboration was a publication in Cognition in 1997 of one of the first experimental studies of agency impairments in schizophrenia. But on a more personal note, the main effect of this collaboration for me is that it got me hooked on action. Before I met Marc, I had read some of the philosophical literature on action and had acquired a passing knowledge of the contemporary debate in the field. But I must confess, had not been fascinated by the topic. One of the main reasons for this lack of fascination, and this is probably where my naturalistic proclivities kick in, is that in contrast with what was happening already in other areas in the philosophy of mind, in particular in the philosophy of perception, philosophers of action seemed to be barely concerned with what was going on in cognitive science. When I read Marc Janro's books and papers and started exchanging with him, it quickly became completely obvious to me that there was much in his work that was of great relevance to philosophers' concerns, and that taking in the insight delivered by the empirical study of action could help the philosophical debate move forward. Let me say a little more about Marc's work and his relation to philosophy and philosophers. Marc Janro was one of the greatest French neurophysiologists of the 20th century. His research on the neurophysiological and cognitive mechanisms underpinning motor control, motor cognition, motor imagery, and the sense of agency played a key role in establishing the new field of cognitive neuroscience of action. Marc was a pioneer, and he was convinced, before many others were, that neurophysiology, experimental psychology, neuropsychology, and neuroscience had to join forces to bridge the gap between brain and mind and pierce the mysteries of action. Not only did he think that these disciplines were related in principle and should collaborate, he also showed by example how their respective approaches could be integrated in actual research practice. In addition, Marc had a strong interest in philosophy. He firmly believed that the dialogue between philosophy and science could be fruitful for both parties. The philosopher whose thinking most influenced his own was Maine de Biran, a French philosopher active at the junction of the 18th and 19th century, and probably not as well known nowadays as he deserves. Maine de Biran held that motor activity was the expression of subjectivity, and that it was the effort of movement production that fundamentally linked the subject to its environment. These ideas find an echo throughout Marx's work, from the analysis of reaching and grasping movements to the study of a sense of agency. Marc Jeanneret did not only enjoy reading the philosophers of the past, he also enjoyed dialoguing and collaborating with philosophers of his day. It was my great privilege to be one of them. I am quite aware that our exchange was unequal, and that he brought me much more than I could repay. Not only did my meeting Marc trigger my interest in action, my own thinking and writing on action and action consciousness was, from the very start, and remains to this day, strongly influenced by his ideas. My intellectual debt to him is immense. My dedicating the paper you're about to read to his memory and thus is thus but a small token of my gratitude.